Hi, everyone. Welcome to Future of Money series presented by LibraTax, here to educate you about digital currency and how it's affecting the accounting profession. And I am here today with Kurt Kunselman from Accounting Suite. I'm so excited to talk to him about what they see the future of money to be and how it will affect the accounting industry. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kurt. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Accounting Suite.
Hey, Denise, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to meet with you today. This is fantastic, and we love the future of money. So first things is my name is Kurt Kunselman, co-founder of Accounting Suite, and I'm sales and marketing director. And what I would say is Accounting Suite is founded. It's a cloud accounting and business software. So we handle the cloud accounting, but we also handle the growing business side of things. So let's say inventory, projects, project tracking, project profitability, advanced inventory, such as assembly. So we're kind of like a QuickBooks Enterprise on the cloud at this point. And so we're from a company starting from zero to NetSuite, and that's Zero to NetSuite, so they can start on the software and they can grow up to about 15 million because at that point they're probably going to want to switch. And we've done a couple deep integrations with the software with a couple digital type payments, but we'll get to that later as you ask more questions. And we're based. Oh, by the way, we're based out of San Francisco, and we started at WeWork Soma, and we continue to stay at WeWork Soma because it's such a great place for a lot of startups and just that whole kind of vibe and like buzz. So we enjoy being here.
I love that. Yes. And I love your shirt, Accounting Suite with the dog. Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
And you mentioned being in the middle of all the buzz. San Francisco hosted a summit in December of this past year, the future of money. And I believe Accounting Suite made a couple of announcements then. Can you share a little bit about what those were?
Sure, we would love to share that. Actually, it was our second future. It was our second Future of Money summit to our Future of Money and Technology summit to exhibit at. So this year, what we announced is we've done deeper integration with Dwala, and we've also done deeper integration with Coinbase. So Dwala being a digital payment system, it's an idea that's been around, but they seem to be doing it really well. And so we added the ability for people to not only pay their vendors and pay their contractors with Dwala, but also to accept payments with Dwala. So that when they send out an invoice, the customer can pay with Dwala. Or we also have integration with Coinbase, which we found is a very solid player in the Bitcoin space, and so we did a deep integration with that, and so and with Coinbase we're continuing to kind of test that out and see different uses of that. But we have some ideas on uses of that, but we can talk more about that because we enjoy talking about that subject. So. But yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. That was a really great conference for us. So.
Awesome. I love to hear that. And Coinbase, like you mentioned, a huge player in the Bitcoin space, I believe, and don't quote me, I think they just got like 75 million in funding.
And it was all in Bitcoin.
Yes, exactly. And so,
No, no, I'm kidding.
I know, well, yeah, it could have been
That
though.
would
Who
be
knows?
awesome. I'd love to have 75 million Bitcoins. I think I'd have everything then. But
And that would
anyway,
be the entire thing. Yes. But like you said, a huge player in the space, and you decided to integrate, or Accounting Suite decided to integrate with that platform. Can you walk us through what exactly that means from the end user's perspective as a business owner and also as the accountant? What that means for me if you're knowing that your accounting software integrates with their platform?
Great questions. So the first question is, as an end user, what's the use case? Maybe how can I use Bitcoin, which with the Coinbase integration? Our main use case for that right now is the ability for is to pay suppliers with Bitcoin. So the reason why that means something is, if you're just in the States and you're paying each other, I mean, Bitcoin may or may not be a good use case. But when you're like, we deal with companies that are in the 5 million, 10 million space. And a lot of times they're global, like they're based out of the US, but they might have suppliers in China, Argentina, or overseas, right? In the UK, wherever it is. So what's great about Bitcoin is the ability to pay your suppliers in Bitcoin because it's a cleaner transaction than what the what the typical case has been over the last 100 years, which is okay. There's a bank that's half goes to this bank, and then once it's shipped, then the other half is let go from this bank and all this other kind of stuff. But there's all sorts of fees that's related to that. So for smaller companies that want to do import export, the one of the barriers actually is the whole foreign payments because wires and all this kind of stuff. So for big companies, they can afford it, right? Here's another $100 fee, $300 fee, whatever. For small companies, those fees build up and it really makes it harder for them to do business. But with Bitcoin and like things like Coinbase and being able to pay your suppliers with that, it helps kind of get rid of that barrier for smaller companies to do import export type business, mostly importing from other countries and paying those suppliers. I would say for our world, like that's the number one use case.
Mm.
Going to your other question, which is from an accounting perspective, wow, that's actually, I think it's such in its infancy from an accounting perspective. So everything I say is just going to be philosophical. It's going to be hard to be, for whatever, it's because whatever I say now, like probably 6 months from now, it's going to change. But that's what happens when you have new types of technologies and you're dealing with GAAP accounting and GAAP rules and now with IFRS. So because IFRS is going to be really involved with this because Bitcoin is such a global currency, IFRS is going to be, of course, GAAP will be in there and everything because we're US based, but for a lot of companies overseas, they might adhere more to IFRS standards. But anyway, I'll kind of move on from that. But really, where the accounting challenge is basically you start treating it just as you do your foreign exchange. So that's the best analogy that I could, like a simple analogy is, well, how do I treat, Bitcoin? Well, you have to look at it from like a foreign exchange. So, like example with our software, like we have a foreign exchange table. So it'll update automatically. Like when you go to do something, it'll say, oh, okay, at, what's today, January 29, 2015, the Bitcoin rate was blah, blah, blah. And then it'll go list those out. But, so for accounting perspective, they have to kind of deal with that from like as if it was another currency. So for those of you that have dealt with that, there's a little bit of I'm going to say a little bit. There is an accounting challenge, but I'm going to name drop one company. There's a company called Subledger. It's really interesting because they deal with micropayments and microtransactions. And a lot of times when you're dealing with Bitcoin, a lot of times you'll have a lot of these microtransactions. So they've developed these algorithms and they have an API it's real, and it allows to kind of track a lot of these big volume Bitcoin transactions. And then you can then push that into an accounting software. So that's a good solution, and they're really focused on the GL side of things. So they're really focused on the accountant, and they're called Subledger. And I forgot who they're financed by, but it's somewhere here in somewhere on Sand Hill Road. But that's a really interesting one. So subledger and that whole virtual currency, digital currency is a good mix because they fit that niche, which is accounting for for all these microtransactions and everything. Because yeah, I mean, Bitcoin changes like, I mean, I don't even keep track anymore. I just go look and everything, and I'm like, it's so hard to keep track, but of course it's fun to keep track, right? Because it's like this. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I
Oh,
wanted to actually touch on something that you said for companies that work with international suppliers, and that I loved how you said it was a cleaner way of transferring money from, say, if you're based here in the States and you're working with someone in China. A lot of times, or a lot of the talk in the accounting profession is that working with digital currency is risky because they don't quite understand it, or it just seems like something that isn't quite legitimate. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of an accountant recommending this to their client relating to a cleaner way of getting money across borders as well as time? That's something to consider as well. So, what are the benefits that an accountant can express to their clients about using digital currency?
well, I would say on that's a great question. Um, the benefits are going to be number one, I would say, is that like China seems to have grasped this whole Bitcoin thing. I mean, at least that's what I've been seeing. But someone may have some other opinions on that. But it's really when you're doing business with manufacturers in like China. I mean, that's where your best use case is. And um, if an accountant's recommending it to their client, I mean, the risk part, yeah, I can understand that. I mean, uh, that's part of doing business, I suppose. But it's at the same time, I mean, if you're because one of the things that Bitcoin does, and one of the reasons why it's uh, one of the reasons that people want to adapt is because it cuts costs, right? It cuts out the bank, right? And the bank has so much control. They start having control over your transactions. And so I think that's like, as an intermediary, that's the word I was trying to think of earlier. So you cut out that intermediary. So, I mean, you bring up the risk, and like, that's really hard to get past. I mean, someone can go, "Oh, well, I watched Bitcoin on the CNBC, or I've been watching it on on the internet," and it's like volatile. But at the same time, aren't other currencies volatile, right? So it's not like Bitcoin's the only volatile currency out there. I mean, right now, I mean, look at the ruble. I mean, you could say, "Oh, well, we bought something and did a deal with." Some Russian import 6 months ago. Now look what happened. So I mean, you can't. So really, I think the advantage is always to focus on the cost cutting that you have by using digital currency because of the fees that you don't have to pay to the intermediaries. But yeah, I mean, risk, you're going to still have risk. So I'd love to be rosy and go, there's no risk and everything. But I mean, you brought it up, and that's a great point that you brought up, and that's what every accountant, when they talk to their client, as you know, it's like, this is the risk. The currency could change, but it is a quick way for you to, if you, especially again I'm focusing on the SMBs here for the small.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I like, let's say all of a sudden I want to design a product. I go patent it on like Monday, and I'm able to, through a connection, find a manufacturer in China, and they're like, well, I mean, if I could just say, hey, I just give you $100,000 worth of, Bitcoin, and you can send that over quickly. It's like, here you go. They're going to be ready to manufacture for you, and that's kind of that. When you're dealing with product market, especially just-in-time inventory, and you got to fulfill your Amazon warehouses. But it's just when you're dealing with manufacturing in China, such for small businesses, time is critical, and so that the idea of time. I mean, you're cutting out a lot of time there. As long as that manufacturer is willing to work with the coin, but you find one that is, right. So
Right.
that's what you're looking for. So the accountants say find a manufacturer in China that takes Bitcoin and that is a reputable manufacturer. So so for startup product companies, I think it's a great tool. I think it's a great tool.
That's a really good point that you brought up. And when it comes to cutting expenses, do you know how much a business could potentially save by using Bitcoin or another digital currency as opposed to a wire transfer, another means of transferring money?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, you're talking about depending on the deal, like the manufacturing. I mean, it could be $100 per order. It could be 300. It could be 3,000.
Hmm.
So I would say as the volume goes up, the savings goes up. So if that, I don't know what, I forgot what the word for that is, but that's what you're looking at. Yeah, I mean, if you only order like four pieces, I mean, maybe that's not going to give you a lot of savings. But if you the more orders you do and that bigger orders that you make from the manufacturer, then that's where you get your savings from. So I'd love to quantify it. I just can't at this point. But that's a great question, Denitha. So maybe next time I'll have an answer for you. I'll go get the Excel sheet out. So
Well, like you said, it does fluctuate the currency, but even at $100 for a small business, that is still a lot of money. And if you're working with a manufacturer overseas, you're probably ordering a lot of pieces, so
yeah.
the savings do start to add up, and that's a really good suggestion that an accountant can make to their client. So yes. So as to wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share as far as what you think the future of money is and how digital currency will affect the accounting profession going forward?
I would say one thing is I think it'll create more jobs. So, um, but yeah, definitely, I would say from the accounting profession perspective, it's going to be something that I mean, right now, if it's realistically, I mean, I'm just being realistic here. It's scary to accountants right now. I think a lot of accountants are scared of it, and for good reason. They're like, oh no, that's not. That's not. It's not something that's been around for 100 years, right? But I think what's going to happen is we're going to have just like we had with software license revenue recognition. It took a while to figure that out.
Hmm.
Then it took a while to figure out like royalties and digital royalties with like the music industry, and then with the film industry, like these YouTube streaming royalties, which are like 0.0001. I mean, there's all this crazy. It's like the more technology we get, the crazier that like the accounting gets. So I think
Hmm.
what would happen is that there's going to be technologies created. I mean, such as like these guys, such as the group is like in the subledger. I think there'll just be more technologies created to help the accountants to take these, you know, all these transactions that are happening and microtransactions and everything, and kind of put it into a package and then hand it off to the accountant. Because I mean, it even goes back to like the telephone billing from like the 60s and 70s. I mean, it was like every phone call was like, zero point zero 0.05 or point zero 0.01, point zero 0.02. I mean, accountants couldn't go in there and try to take a, 10 key and try to add up the whole phone bill. So it's like they figured out at one point, oh, maybe we should summarize it and categorize it. So even phone companies had to figure out ways to make the accounting easier for the accountants.
Hmm.
So in each industry that comes up with these payment systems and these royalties and all this type of things that creates more transactions, they then figure out ways to help the accountants. So I don't think that it's going to like overburden the accountants. I think there's just going to be more technologies that help to like help the accountants, and then it'll just be part of everyday life because I mean, when you go back, if you go backwards, and then you go back to when these things came out, it was always some kind of disruption. It was like, oh my God, look at the size of that bill. How am I going to account for it? And someone figured it out. So I think it's going to be the same scenario. Oh wow, what are we going to do with all this Bitcoin, all these transactions, and blah blah. Well, someone's going to figure it out and go, oh, and then it'll just become like a new standard, and then there'll be a a gap. There'll be some new article and gap, how to account for Bitcoin transactions. So they're going to come out with something. So probably three things. I would guess probably three like standards would come out. Three like FASB standards would probably come out for like Bitcoin. But I don't think any more than that. It's just like software licensing. Only I mean if I look back, I can't remember. It's been a while, but I think there's only like three or four that are in there for software licensing. But they're important, right? It's all
Right.
about because it's the revenue recognition. That's where people want to make sure that they account for it correctly.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. Yes, new technology like LibreTax and obviously like Accounting Suite. Can you tell us where we can find more about Accounting Suite?
Sure, sure. One trick to get to Accounting Suite is type in uncomplicatedsoftware.com because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to use the cloud to uncomplicate everyone's life, like in the business world, especially with products and everything like that and like projects. But also, they can go to our website, which is accountingsuite.com, and Twitter at Accounting Suite. And it's SUITE. But even if you put in accounting, SWEET.com, we have that one too, so that it goes to our website because you never know, people might
I
be hungry or something. So,
I love that. And accounting is sweet, duh.
oh, that's awesome. It is sweet. Sweet.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kurt, and the fabulous information that you shared. This is really,
Sure.
really exciting. Just the direction that we're going in with the future of money. So thank you for your time, and we'll chat soon.
Alrighty. Thanks. Thank you, Denitha.
Bye.
Ciao.